Greetings, my name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, licensed presenters, the Core New Core, and anyone interested in teaching or being a student of Pilates or movement in their own bodies. So human beings. Sentient human beings. So Christy, are you still out there? Did you start following and then one or two is enough? When the earth goes around once, that's 1 day. And in 5 days, look at there, just one hand, 5 days, the solstice occurs where a change in the orientation of the planet on its path happens. So reliably and so predictably that tables are on the web. Go to timeanddate.com and look at seasons. And you can see exactly when this transition occurs. But back in the day, say Peru and the Inca Empire, that survived on the success of their crops. It's such a great story. Machu Picchu was a place to observe the planets in motion. And they came to expect and anticipate and then recognize by observing the change. And if they're not watching, if they're not observing, then there is no issue there. And survival has to happen other than that. I think of all the stuff that has gone by unobserved by me that I wish I'd have been aware of or able to observe sooner. You know, and isn't that human nature? So 5 days. Just set a timer. 3:43 Rocky Mountain time. Christy, where are you? I think back east, right? Chicago, 4:43. New York, 5:43. Chicago is in the same time zone as Peru. And in Peru is Machu Picchu. What's cool about this change is that it happens in the moment. And for each of us, it could be at a different time, depending upon where we are on the earth. But the moment is the same for all of us, because what we're traveling on is changing orientation. And already you hear newscasters talk about the solstice and when summer actually officially starts. So, the Incas used their ability to observe to survive. And Pilates is all about survival. Joseph Pilates was a survivor. His method is survival training. And what we're trying to survive in, what we're running through the jungle is gravity. It's such a great message. And it's all right here in Joe's book. That everybody that has any kind of depth of passion or is interested in at least having Joe's book that explains his method, that describes his method, that explains it too. His definition, his promise, and his sequence. Add to that an understanding of core new tension, which is all about biodynamics. you have the means to, meaning, in this book, Joe says, contrology develops the body uniformly, comma, and then more of a sentence, but that's all of the words that MMP, that's a M for Michael, an M for Miller, and a P for Pilates. Go back and look at my recordings that are all sign language. I so appreciated trying to communicate past those that spoke a language other than English. It's easy to lean on your own language and presume understanding. Christy, you know, do you get it yet? It's like, oh man, I gotta quit doing this, because I got indignant a while ago and just quit broadcasting, because that's not the attitude. I was talking to the wrong audience in my head because of who was observing in Facebook. You follow that? So when I came back to broadcasting, I hadn't shaved in a while because of the pandemic. And I wanted to build your skills in understanding the two things I want you to be able to present on and make money on. Just those two things. And the more that's the only two things you offer, in my opinion, you isolate what it is you're selling, and then in selling that clearly enough, everything else that is you comes in behind it to reinforce it. Now you may want to consider or believe that all it is you, and it's you that leads the way. And if so, okay. But that leaves you on the point of things, and it's you that matters more than the knowledge that you have that is beyond you individually. And so that takes me to my screw up today on my 2 emails. I usually schedule my time early in the morning, 4:30, for the email that was last year. And I'm sending all of last year's emails that are still in constant contact, because they did a great job of progressing the point of view through the sequence of the convention of the solstice. Why the convention and the solstice are connected. And that's because of observing. Observing. And observing, in Joe's book, according to my impression, according to MMP, the two things you carry around in your hip pocket from me are theories. That's all they are theories. The better you understand the theories, perhaps the better you can pursue your movement. I think of pursuing Pilates because the two things that are both theories, the first thing and the most important thing I have to offer you personally, regardless of whether you care about Pilates or know anything about Pilates, is that I'm holding light to the existence of, I'm holding light to the existence of core new tension in the body. And it's core new tension. It's through core new tension that we seek to achieve the second thing. There's 5 things to know about. To be a presenter and explain 2 things. And the 2 things you explain are theories. That's all. So for $10 in 30 minutes, I can explain the theories as best I can. Offer ends when I walk away, or when the conversation's over, or within the hour. Set a timeline to your offer. Make an offer for how much, for how long, expires when. Is how I would have you structure the offers that you make. And they don't have to be for a lot of money. Or they can be in agreement with the CEO just after you've delivered a stellar performance, and he's actually willing to pay the amount you offered, the amount in your offer. Control your income stream by being the one that's willing to make an offer. Because the whole thing is an educational projection in and of itself. Right? You identify what it is. For how long and for how much, paid in advance. Be Aretha Franklin. She got paid cash before she sang. Period. Cash. The story goes, as I read it, she would either put the cash in her purse on the piano while she played, or give it to her bodyguard and he would hold on to it while she performed. Be Christopher Columbus in your offers, and part of that has to be Aretha Franklin's perspective. Because whatever the theory is, and however old this goes, if this is in the year 3030, and it's been around that long, the theory will be that much better understood, but what you bring to it will be that much more unique. Not more unique, will be unique because it's you. And so I screwed up today because I usually send out the early email at 4:30 my time, and then one at noon. And the reason I picked noon is because in Rocky Mountain time, that reaches from Hong Kong to Moscow. Or St. Petersburg, if you want to say that, or what other city. But the broadest reach of time span for me to send out is, I think, noon my time. Because it's early enough to catch Hong Kong at a reasonable hour, bright and early, and all the way reach into St. Petersburg. Or Moscow. I think they're on the same time zone. Thank you for your patience. And I have to do this yet again on Facebook. My emails came out, usually that one I send at noon, See, I know the story, sort of, but I forget the pieces that connect it together. I usually send at 12:01 p.m. And I missed it. It went out at 12:01 a.m. So it went out just when today started, just when 5 days away started, at my midnight. If you're in Philly, it's, I don't know, it's Philly, New York time or Central time? It's tough to know all the time. Zones. My early morning from last year, was about personal and universal. And the instructor that I think I rubbed her fur the wrong way, because to her Pilates was sacred. And until then hadn't gained an appreciation for, maybe not, maybe just, she added to my recognition that when you do Pilates, it's a totally personal interaction. And it affects you personally. Historically, the folklore that a body of knowledge has looked at Pilates. Now, don't lose that. I lost it though. There it went. I'm trying to. Oh, universality. As though Pilates being sacred is all there is, and that really there is only folklore, and within the folklore, it's presumed that beyond what exists in the attic, which isn't much, if anything, really. The key point, Christy, that I'd have you take away is that in Joe's own book, in Joe's own words, it is the Holy Grail. And there's nothing in the attic that will ever eclipse what Joe already handed to you in his book. And the very first thing he handed to you was a definition of what contrology is. And if it's his method and it's his book, right, I would think he has had some consideration to or ponderance. I think he thought about it. If I were writing a book and I were saying what the subject of my book was, contrology is complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. You want to believe that it's just about your personal life and your path, and that Pilates is a tradition you're passing on through you that is subjectively determined, because there is no explanation to Pilates within the folklore, and the folklore doesn't want one. Well, to the extent that folklore matters more than understanding, will always be an impediment to folklore's understanding, that they refuse to entertain more knowledge. So there's what you know up here, knowledge. And there's knowledge you get word of mouth, passed down by generation to generation, and there's there's knowledge that you get by explanation, word of mouth. People that study with Joe and their lineages, that's all folklore as a kind of knowledge. But there's also knowledge of explanation, of understanding beyond the word of mouth, passed on as though there is no explanation. And the reason MMP is transcendent as a point of view of Pilates is because it steps beyond the presumption of folklore being the self-defined limitation of what makes Pilates. Willfully ignorant of explanation that eclipses, or at least transcends, or goes beyond what folklore holds dear in and of itself and doesn't care to entertain explanation. It's like, okay, that will be a subgroup within the culture of Pilates. And what's interesting is that the aristocracy is losing, I think, as far as size as far as size within the culture is losing mass, and the pursuit of profits is expanding. And of course, profits will go wherever it's easy to make the most money, right? That's the whole thing about profits. And that's what leaves you the opening to actually understand more about what's going on than where the big money really wants to go. That makes you a boutique dealer of what is universal, and by being universal is an explanation of what it is. And it's always better to be selling something that doesn't have an explanation, because there's no need to aspire towards that explanation. So, blah, blah. I'm going to go to YouTube and try to recover some energy. I'm sorry, it's tough to do. The two things. The best news of all, the two things you can feel. You can feel. You can feel core tension in your body. Once you're aware of this, you can either shield it out and pretend you never heard it, or you're at least aware of it as a theory, which it is. It's a theory about how the body engages itself to move through space. And you can feel it. Number two is MMP. And MMP is a point of view of Pilates that goes beyond a look at Pilates through folklore and the presumption of inexplicability to making an explanation of what Pilates is based on what Joe says. I know. One part of my mind says I should be holding up the year 2000. So this is the 20th anniversary for this book being out there in the world. Now it's self-published, and it's all kinds of errors or whatever, but it's just a very early drumbeat to what I'm here trying to tell you now, 20 years later, that you could have known for 20 years, and you've been unaware of or ignored. Number two is that when Joe says contrology is complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit, okay? Michael Miller says that that's an experience, that contrology is an experience. Now, in terms of all the views of Pilates, that narrows things down considerably, wouldn't you say, in terms of the MMP point of view? But if you have in your pocket an understanding of this theory called Michael Miller Pilates, where Pilates is an experience, and you can explain the theory well enough to sound credible, I guess, you have that as part of your repertoire of knowledge that guides you in your effort to move. So my closing comment is that knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is influence. Knowledge, not only is that, but knowledge gains results. When you go into teaser old Joe versus teaser new Joe, get a clue. Get a clue. Core to tension, even as a theory, will challenge your roots and folklore, but would you rather more come closer to the essence of what it is, according to MMP, or would you rather stay wrapped in the cloak of folklore and remain restricted to that point of view only? To me, Christy, and if you're gone, I'm sorry, and to address you directly, there's a lot of Christies in the world. The bad news is, Pilates is more than you thought it is. The good news is, Pilates is more than you thought it is, than you think it is. That was the first time, but that's a good way to put it. Are you interested in growth and emergence and knowing more to be more empowered in order to survive? Or stay participant in the court of folklore, because that's what you want to do. That's fine. Each to his own. But if you're yawning in the court and looking for something more substantial than where you've been, you at least ought to know about those two theories. And I've done my best to tell you what I could while I could. And why is that? Because life can't live forever. Read between the lines, see behind the curtain, connect the dots, add 2 and 2. Evaluate points of view before you add 2 and 2. You know? See differences. Be Columbus. Be Aretha. Direct your thinking. Geist.